be. Because I don't think they take. I think they take. This is, like I said, Paisan heaven here. I mean, Angelo and Farzetta, who's coming up here in a second. I mean, well, then again, Howard Eskin, so I don't know too much. I mean, he showed me an Elvis doll. I don't know what that meant. That whole thing behind him. He had an Elvis. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell the Elvis doll was. He goes, look at this. It's an Elvis doll. I'm like, what is that here, man? So really fortunate to get these guys on, by the way, too. Ray Didinger, man. He'll be on with us on Friday, I believe, taken away from his he's working on his book about Eagle history. He's writing a new chapter, Jalen Hurts and Sirianni era and all that. So we're looking forward to having him on. That'll be on Friday. But without further ado, man, I haven't talked to Farzy in a long time here, man. So let's get his thoughts here on what's going on with – they signed today Joshua Tree Uche. 4 sacks in 41 games. How you doing? Okay? Remember something, man. They're overhauling that defense. I'd say they took a blowtorch to that defense, but that's the price of winning. Let's see what Marc Farzetta has to say. He starts our broadcasting off here on JAKIB Sports. How you doing, brother?
Good. Thanks. Usually an extreme close-up when I start out, and we just pulled out. So I like that. Thank you. I appreciate it. And yes, one of the prerequisites is you have to at least have one of your parents Italian ancestry in order to be talking about sports in Philadelphia. So fortunately, I checked the box. So here I am, friend. How you doing?
Absolutely, man. I love the fact that you worked with Howard too. He's now becoming a staple now on the program, and I appreciate him coming on. And you know, you guys know how this guy works here. And I've said this before to you. I think the Eagles are doing the right thing right now. I mean, you're looking at what's happening in the next couple years. Going to have a ton of draft choices. You had to make some tough choices. Farzy, isn't this a little bit what New England went through in 20 years when they had to move off of guys like Richard Seymour, Darrelle Revis, Randy Moss? I mean, you had to have cap integrity, and you had to have roster structure. I mean, what am I missing here? Why are people freaking out that, again, you're letting young, good players – that's the difference, though. I mean, Sweat and Slay are 25, 27 years old. You let CJ walk out the building. We'll get to him, but how are you seeing this offseason so far?
I'm seeing this as almost a necessary evil, and I think most people understood that Josh Sweat wasn't going to be back. I think most people understood that Darius Slay wasn't going to be back with the Eagles. Milton Williams, good Lord, did he get overpaid? And, hey, you know, good for him. Usually the phrase is, oh, they outbid themselves when they signed so-and-so player. They had to outbid the Carolina Panthers. So good for Milton Williams that he had 2 people bidding. He certainly made out on that. So I think most people understood that those guys weren't going to be back. I maintained throughout the season, towards the end of the season, or at least when we started to really know so early on in the year that Zach Bond was going to be a legitimate player. I didn't know he was going to be a Defensive Player of the Year finalist, but I maintained that he was going to come back to the Eagles. And Howie Roseman said throughout the draft, or said throughout the combine, that we were going to have to look at the Eagles. The Eagles were going to have to look at Zach Bond as if he was priority number 1, and they were going to have to take away from other places to make sure that they kept him around. They didn't grow him as a football player, but they grew him as a talent, and that's all that really matters. And Vic Fangio was the one that was able to crack that code and get the absolute best out of Zach Bond, which ended up being one of the best in the NFL. So I knew some of these guys were going to be out the door. I wasn't expecting a Saquon Barkley extension. I don't know if that was a financial apology or not for Week 18, but certainly well worth that dime, no doubt about that. But I think a lot of people, when you look at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, it's very rare that you have such a cut and dry case of you went to the Super Bowl with him, you got rid of him, didn't go to the Super Bowl, you brought him back, you went back to the Super Bowl, and you won it. So, like, what am I missing here? If you want to break it down to the Pro Football Focus numbers that said he allowed the most touchdowns in the NFL in 12 seasons, then fine, you could go to that. But the bottom line is a lot of those touchdowns came early on in the season when the defense was still very much figuring things out. And he's the only guy, Dan, that you could look at that in the second half of Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl round 1, he was the only guy bringing the wood for 4 quarters. Yeah. He was the only guy who I didn't doubt. And I never doubt his intensity, his work ethic, or his leadership, like some might, especially with the way it affected this Eagles team. And throughout the season, you saw no matter what was said about Nick Sirianni, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was always talking about how he'd go out there and play for his coach, he'd go out there and play for Fangio. And quite frankly, it came down to a love affair with the city. So I think that's the one that stings the most. Now, for part 2 of your question with Howie Roseman, talk about the proof being in the pudding. I know I've told you this before, Dan. This job was a lot more fun when Howie Roseman sucked at his job. Okay, this is a lot. When he when he sucked, this was so much easier to talk about this stuff. Like, you knew a lot more than him. But talk about the proof in the pudding, man. This is a guy that's now had 3 Super Bowl rosters. He's had 2 different head coaches over that span. The one Super Bowl was with a backup quarterback that he brought in with one of the deepest rosters ever in the NFL to win a Super Bowl. And then comes back with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, loses once, wins the next time with what some people are trying to rip the Eagles with by saying that, oh, it was a super team. It was a super team that beat the Chiefs. Is that supposed to be a slight? Because that seems like a super compliment to Howie Roseman. So I do think that there's an overriding sense, no matter how disappointed you might be to see Sweat, Williams, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, whoever, leave the nest, there's an overwhelming sense of confidence that Howie knows what he's doing.
How about this, Mark, about that Gardner-Johnson move here? Like you said, well, he has been to 3 straight NFC championship games, 2 Super Bowls, and 2 Super Bowls with the Eagles, and he's had 12 picks in those 2 years where he was a turnover machine. Now, it's funny. Of course, if you talk to the Eagle fans, because of the equity of the Lombardi Trophy, which is rightfully so, it's funny. I hear, well, Sidney Brown would be able to step right in it. And I'm going like, it's funny. Vic Fangio, when he was looking for a guy to go in there, when he needed a role player, they went to Tristan McCullum. They didn't go to Sidney Brown. Yeah. So I know they may like the player, but that's not the guy they went to. I mean, was it more about attitude in your opinion? I mean, the Taylor Swift shirt at the parade, the back and forth. I mean, I heard this about him. When it came to scheme, he would break the structure of what they were doing. By the way, that ranking about the TD passes is true. But take a look at where he was ranked in PFF when it came to coverage. He was 5th in safeties. So, I mean, he's a playmaking guy who takes risk, and he plays out of the box. He's not a structured guy. I'm assuming Vic said we can find a guy who can play in a scheme a little bit more with integrity of the scheme, may not have the same playmaking ability. But again, too, Mark, usually Howie does things to save money. This was a cash move. Mm-hmm. Do you think this was more of an attitude move and why they wanted him out of there? Because this just doesn't make sense.
I think it all comes down to money when it comes to Howie. I, without doubt, think
27.
Yeah. And I think without doubt, they put this in front of Vic Fangio and they said, look, we're looking to, get free up some money here, free up some cap space. We got moves we got to make. Vic, we're thinking about moving on from Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. There's an opportunity to bring in a guard, as well as another 5th-round pick. Would it crush you if we let him go? No, that's probably the way it went. And I agree in terms of kind of going a little bit more free form. One of the things I liked about reacquiring Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was the idea that he seems to really understand a master of freedom when it comes to Vic Fangio's scheme. Of all the things that they talked about, and I'm sure you saw all the stories that come out of Miami about Vic Fangio and his relationship with a lot of the veteran players, one of the things that I really found interesting before everything hit the fan, if you caught Hard Knocks within the season, I went back and I watched it just for Vic Fangio stuff. And I really found it interesting that they spoke glowingly about Vic Fangio and his scheme. And it was the idea of understanding the freedom it allows a player, especially a defensive back, a safety, a nickel, whatever the case might be. You really understand the freedom, you can flourish in that system. I thought Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did a hell of a job of understanding that. Maybe it was a little too footloose and fancy-free for old Vic Fangio, but again, it worked. As far as the attitude portion of this, I don't think that had a lot to do with it. I think it had to do with numbers, and I think it had to do with overall play within the scheme. The attitude, the Eagles didn't just meet Chauncey Gardner-Johnson before the season. They kind of got a good understanding of who he was when he was in with the Saints in New Orleans, and certainly when they got here, they understood the player that he was. When they let him go, they understood the player that he was, and they brought him back because of the player that he was, not because I think they had anything necessarily against his attitude. He is always Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, CJGJ, CD Deuce. No matter what you call him, he's always going to be the same type of player. He's always going to be the same type of person. He's always going to love to talk. And I think Darius Slay has been asked a number of times when he was at the Eagles, now talking about him in the past tense, who talks more? Slay, Brandon Graham, or Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? And the overwhelming consensus was nobody talks more than BG, but the close second is Chauncey Gardner-Johnson when he's out there on the football field. So I think they understood the mentality of the player, the attitude of the player, and certainly the personality of the player. But overall, numbers, schematically, I think they felt like they had to move on from him.
Here is my take on Howie this offseason. You tell me, because you've covered him way longer than me. I look at him maybe taking a step back roster-wise. I didn't say wins and losses. I have no idea what that's going to look like next year. You build your team now. If you're building your team in September, you're late. You got to find the pieces to go to work. The payoff is during the regular season on what the work you do in the offseason is. And to me, with the draft picks that they have, they know they're going to have to pay, and we'll talk about it a little bit. They're going to have to pay, I think, north of $40 million potentially for Jalen Carter next year in an extension. I mean, he's going to reset the market because we're seeing, I mean, like you just mentioned, Milton Williams, who I think is a good player. Do I think he's a $30 million a year guy, 26? No, I do not. And do I think he even fulfills that contract? There's even an out after 2 years to protect the Patriots to get the hell out of that deal in the third year. So it goes down to 12 in the third year. So they can move off that thing because the cap's going to be over $300 million by then. So you got to really look at the guaranteed dough in that end here. I mean, he's taking, because you lost 5 starters on defense. I don't care what anybody says. You know, me being Big Sills, I'd say you took a blowtorch to it, but whatever you want to do, if you take a lighter to it, you have lost 5 starters, and now you have question marks going in to this season, or at least the offseason here, and here are your edge guys.
Yeah.
A Nolan Smith, who's injured, Jalix Hunt, who's a project still. We don't know can that guy play 3 downs? Can he go 20 games? I don't know. Bryce Huff, who was a colossal disaster last year. And now you got Emilio Acho or Joshua Uche. Those are your edge guys, not counting the guy you're going to draft. I mean, your edge, they didn't really need a superstar edge to win a Super Bowl last year. But how do you see how he's constructing this team? It just seems, they're rentals every year on defense. It's like they lease that side of the ball, like you're leasing a car and they buy the car over on the offense.
Mm-hmm. I had a similar thought, and it's along the same lines as you have a stacked offense right now. You know that this offense is going to score points. You know Saquon Barkley behind this offensive line. And look, if there's any position to be cocky with or position group to be cocky with the Eagles, it's the offensive line. And you feel like Jeff Stoutland can just wave his magic offensive lineman wand and produce another Pro Bowler. But you feel like you're far ahead of the vast majority of the league. And you should feel it. You blow out the Kansas City Chiefs in a Super Bowl, you feel like the league's got some catching up to do to you.
Oh, yeah.
The problem, though, with that is I never like it when teams get cocky, and I'm not saying that Howie Roseman is getting cocky, but I think part of his approach is this offense is stacked. We can have a lot of wiggle room on defense. We might have a year here where not necessarily have anything over dramatic like a gap year or anything like that, where they just kind of sit still and stand pat and allow themselves to move on from not only, as you mentioned, the interceptions leader in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but also your sack leader in Josh Sweat. You see what Nolan Smith can develop into. You see what Moro Ojomo can develop into. You certainly see what Jalen Carter can do. And you know how dominant he can be. So can he help bridge that gap and make things a little bit easier for the incumbent, for whoever is going to take over for Milton Williams? Can he make things that much easier? Is Jalen Carter going to be a bit of a kingmaker in terms of, I can get the next guy paid too? Not just myself, but get another guy paid to the standard of Milton Williams. Can he make another guy look that good? Right. So I think Howie is counting on this offense to be as dominant as it was this past season, especially with Saquon. And A.J. Brown was never going anywhere and never bought into anything that he was going to the Patriots. So you're still going to have a stacked offense. Tight end-wise, Dallas Goedert being given permission to seek a trade, the Eagles not being willing to pay him what he wants to be paid in the future. I think you're going to go back a little bit with tight end. You're most likely going to draft. But I think Howie's looking at it as my offense is still going to be pretty stacked. I can still put up points. It's a matter of whether or not my defense can at least hold teams. And this isn't with a bunch of scrubs. You still got obviously Jalen Carter in that middle of that defensive line. You still have Zach Ball and Nakobe Dean coming back from injury. They seem to be pretty high on Jeremiah Trotter Jr., especially allowing Oren Burks to walk for next to nothing. And then you also have your corners. You also have your defensive backs in your nickel. You have Quenyon Mitchell and you have Cooper DeJean. So you still feel pretty good about the defense. You still lost a significant amount, but you feel like right now you have guys in-house that can help build that and guys later that you can groom to take over for that. But I think it mostly comes down to how much confidence Howie Roseman and really I think the entire Eagles fan base has in the offense, that you have a little bit of wiggle room defensively because you feel like you can outscore opponents with this offense.
I mean, here's another example of, fans going, well, Keely Ringo, going to slide him in the corner. Well, that's not who Vic went to last year when he needed he went to Isaiah. I mean, Isaiah Rodgers was the swing corner. Keely Ringo wasn't the guy. Now, albeit I get it. He's 20. He's a young kid. I mean, he was young when he came into the league. You still kind of maybe you see some talent that the kid has there, but I don't think that that's going to be that easy to replace Darius Slay out there. I mean, the Steelers went out and gave him a $10 million deal, which I thought was insane for a 35-year-old corner, 34-year-old corner, what have you, man. I mean, holy cow there. But of all the guys that have been exited off the team, Slay, Sweat, Milton Williams, Oren Burks, Isaiah, who do you believe is going to be the toughest to find really the replacement that's going to bring you the volume of production? That is he on the team? Do you think those guys? Who do you think is going to be the toughest to replace?
I honestly think it's going to be Darius Slay because he played well last year. He was banged up, and he looked like a guy that was saving a lot for the postseason. I will say that. I agree. The $10 million from the Steelers. When I saw that, I was like, yeah, absolutely not doing that. He looked at it. He looked at it as his last bag, as most athletes do. So good for him. But I think outside corner, there's one theory floating around out there that Cooper DeJean in a base 4-3 would play on the outside, and then when they moved to nickel, he would move back to nickel with Keely Ringo being moved out there. But I thought the same thing. Now, if I remember correctly, in the Green Bay game, in the first game of the season in Brazil, we were all expecting, I believe it was Isaiah Rodgers to come off the bench first to go out there at corner, but it was Keely Ringo. And then Ringo started to lose favor, got banged up a little bit, and Isaiah Rodgers started to take over. But to answer your question point blank, the person that's going to be missed the most is Milton Williams. I like Jordan Davis, but Jordan Davis went down in terms of snaps. I know, nose tackle, whatever you want to call him, but who's going to be that guy that's going to be next to Jalen Carter? Jalen Carter is going to open up a red carpet for whoever's going to be playing defensive tackle with him. And that red carpet is going to lead to a big old bag of money, just like it did for Milton Williams, if somebody comes in here and is at the very least talent-wise adequate. You're going to look a hell of a lot better playing next to Jalen Carter with the double teams he's going to be taking up. I want to see Jordan Davis be able to take over that responsibility a little bit more than, 33% of the snaps? Are you kidding me? Oh, I want to see somebody come in here and take over that responsibility with great authority, the way they should. Even somebody who is a little bit talented. Not somebody coming in here as an established Pro Bowler or a seasoned veteran or anything like that. Just somebody coming in here looking to make a name for themselves with some ability. They're going to look pretty damn good if they are at least a little bit good playing next to Jalen Carter. So I look at that defensive tackle spot as still something that the Eagles have to fill. It has to be somebody that could come in here and play at the very least, 40% of the snaps whenever you don't see Jordan Davis on the field with him.
Two last ones here for you, Farzy. Okay, so what you're saying there is, okay, and I agree with everything you just said, but here's my take back at people. So last year, Jalen Carter was one of the most double and triple team guys. And you had two dudes on that D line, and Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, who just signed significant deals. You really think you got the guys on the roster that are going to limit those double teams and triple teams, that these guys who haven't played those reps, that you're going to limit the triple teams and double teams of Jalen Carter? I find that to be a tough ask. And like you said, Moro Ajomo, I agree with you, because here I think is the hidden value of Milton. Milton can play a 7-5-3, and at times if you need a zero technique in the nose, he could get down in there and play. His versatility is what made him an expensive guy, but it also created the ability to be able to be versatile. Look at the way Zach Vaughn could cover and also the way he pursued. Look at how you had versatility with Cooper DeJean, putting him in the slot. You could also, how he ran around the field and looked like a corner at times, looked like a slot nickel. You had all these guys with all this versatility that you had. That's a big loss when you're talking about what that guy brought to your football team. And then the volume of reps that Josh Sweat. You're talking about a guy north of 600 snaps and 40 sacks in the last 5 years that brought to your football team. And you're going to get limited double teams on him? Boy, that's going to – you're really asking Vic to kind of make chicken shit in chicken soup here, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, and you're supposed to do that with still you still got to get a corner. And I know the draft still has to – and that's the other thing about – and you know that everyone knows this, but you look at the offseason, the NFL, and I always make the point that it kind of sucks because nobody else has the blueprint but Howie and maybe Jeffrey Lurie. So you're only seeing moves being done one at a time. So you judge, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson being here and be like, well, what the hell are they going to do? And that then you judge, Darius Slade not being here and you're like, I call it because still kind of saw it coming, but what are they going to do? So is it the draft? Is it continuing in the free agency? Are they going to Justin Simmons, has spoken highly about the Eagles, obviously in the offseason, all that stuff. So for me, when it comes to the defensive line, though, the Eagles always tell you time and time again, and Howie Roseman reiterated this at the Combine, they know where their bread's buttered. It's in the trenches. It's the offense and defensive line. Last year, Sills, you and I had a conversation, and I had this conversation with many people, but we weren't used to the Eagles going into a season with they were a little light there at the defensive line position. Yeah. Milton Williams still had to prove himself a little bit. You know what you had in Jordan Davis. Everyone was feeling good about the shape he was in, and he looked like a cyclist when he was cycling for the Eagles during their charity event, and everyone jumped on that. He had the great phrase about Fletcher Cox isn't walking through that door. This is our time, and that amounted into fewer snaps. So that's so much of this season and the success is going to ride on how much more of a step forward you can see from Jordan Davis, because seeing him take a decrease in snaps and seeing someone of the versatility of Milton Williams, that's one of the things you loved about him, playing on the outside, playing on the inside. You could have 3 defensive tackles out there, essentially. That was great, but Jordan Davis has to take that next step forward. If you're looking at anybody on the roster, other than Keely Ringo, maybe, that could take that big step forward to really help out this team and gloss over whatever has happened in free agency to the point where in the years to come, we talk about the 2025 offseason after they won the Super Bowl. Well, Howie unloaded a lot of the defensive players, but they didn't miss a beat. That's what you're hoping for. But it's Keely Ringo and it's also Jordan Davis. It's 2 guys that are on the roster right now that need to take the biggest step forward if they're going to help bridge the gap between anything else going on right now in this Eagles defense. Hey, look, Tristan McCullum, good for him. I don't see him doing it. Yep. Sidney Brown, I love Sidney Brown. I root for Sidney Brown. He's an easy guy to root for. He's a heat-seeking missile and all that stuff, but you got to find a way to corral that into making smart plays, not always the big hit. And I know he's a very determined player, and I hope he can do it. But I don't have confidence. The guys that I think are at least somewhat close to making something happen are Jordan Davis and Keely Ringo.
Last one here for you. You mentioned him. I mean, right now on March 13th, he's eligible this offseason here for a contract extension is Jordan Davis. I mean, here's a guy who can't play 3 downs. He plays 20 snaps, a little bit over that a game. 20 snaps. And the way it's looking, he's a 3rd-tier guy on that 5th-year option if you want to use that to extend him. So it's somewhere around $12 million for a guy who wasn't better than Milton Williams and Moro Ajomo the last 2 years. Right now, do you think that guy, are you extending him? Now, let's go on the other side. I think the linebacking core, I think they benefited from having him and Carter being in there. And I thought Jordan actually, from the Giant game at the end of the year through the playoffs, I thought he actually played well. He was in better shape because of what Vic did with the extra conditioning that had them guys ready. So I'm caught in the middle, and I don't really like that. But, I mean, I'm looking at him, and I don't know, man, just to sit there and go, yeah, I'll stroke a check for $12 million. Now, I turn around and go, look what Milton got at 26. Is that a bargain?
Yeah,
it might be, but the versatility that guy brought, And if you're telling me Moro Jomo and Milton Williams are better, how am I signing him to a 12-year contract per year on an extension? I just don't see it.
But right, the $12 million for him, it still seems steep, no matter what, because it's the Eagles' money. But did you sign Jonathan Allen? Nope. Did you re-sign Milton Williams? Nope. So what are you going to now save money? What are you talking about? $12 million from one of your own homegrown players? If you would have asked me at the end of the season, and I was saying at the end of the season, I don't think he's earned that deal. I mean, you're talking about the year. You're talking about the year. I bet since when has that mattered? You know what I mean? In sports, has he earned the deal? No, we'll give it to him anyway.
It mattered though, Farzy, to them when it came to Gardner-Johnson. When it came, because that's a money move. That wasn't just there was no cap savings. They didn't want to pay the guy $8 million anymore because they thought they could do more with maybe what they had on the roster, or maybe they're going to find somebody else. I mean, that's exactly whatever you want to believe happened there. But I mean, that was a money move. This right here, could this be a money move too? Or do you believe it? Because the production he has not been productive since he's been here.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I thought this year was supposed to be the big test.
Yeah.
This is good. And look, I thought he played well at the beginning of the season.
To a lesser position,
Right. They asked him to do less, essentially. But literally, and less snaps. They're say, hey, you know what? Do less, and that'll help us. So I still think he gets that extension. As we mentioned, talking about the safety position in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the Eagles, I think they feel they have someone in-house that could take over in Tristan McCullum. I feel like they have someone that could also compete for that role in Sidney Brown. And when you come to the defensive tackle position for the Eagles, hey, look, I'm hopeful for Moro. I'm hopeful for Thomas Booker IV. You know what I mean? But that you're a little weak there at that position. You're a little light on that depth chart. You were last year going into it. Milton Williams played better than anybody thought. Nolan Smith, I told you last year, if I'm with the Eagles, I'm not expecting anything from Nolan Smith. He's got to show me. And boy, did he show me this year after the bye week, and then ramped it up another period after BG went down against the Rams. I need to see guys step up, and the Eagles certainly need to see guys step up, and nobody looks like they're stepping up right now on the defensive line other than Jalen Carter. I got hopes for Moro Jomo. Jordan Davis has to be that next man up. He has to be the guy they depend on. And this was supposed to be the huge test. And he didn't look like a guy that really passed the test to me. Start of the season, I thought he played well. End of the season started to come on a little bit. He also was getting double teamed. And then I thought in the playoffs, he put together a nice run. Not a great run, not a, redeeming run. But where's that level all season long? And that's the test that I don't think he passed throughout the year.
$13 million for one tackle and 40 for the other. How you doing? You see that going on? They're going to pay 13 for one and 40 for another.
Well, I wish I was bigger. I wish I was more athletic, and I could have played.
I wish I was thinner and younger.
Yeah. But I think they. What comes down to the Eagles is they're going to pay Jordan Davis the extension. They're gonna sign him onto that rookie extension, they're gonna put him. Yeah, if you're asking my desire versus my prediction is they do it. Yeah, and then this will be the real test. This will be the real test as to whether or not he can pass. That'll be their attitude. That'll be their mindset with it throughout the upcoming season. And right now they don't have many better options. And then, as part of paying Jalen Carter, the absolute you can't not pay that guy. That could be, if Jordan Davis doesn't pass the test, that could be more money in Jalen Carter's pocket. Damn. Where it should go anyway.
I'll tell you what, man. They ain't paying them guys in liras. I'll tell you that. They're paying them guys in big bucks, bro. I'll tell you, man. Howie, this guy here, man, is like the Wizard of Oz.
What would 20 million lira be? No, what would $20 million be in lira?
Wait, in today's market, probably in Trump's world, probably $7.
$7. Jeez, Mary and Joseph. That's a couple of dollars. That's 4 crates of eggs, I think.
Yeah. No. Oh my God, eggs are $12 a shot, man. How you doing?
I'm gonna start buying chickens like my grandfather. You know what I mean?
Yeah, chickens. That's right. That's what we need. We need to go see paisans. People don't understand. We grow fig trees. We grow peach trees. Okay. We used to have a fig tree in our backyard. My grandfather spoke Italian 50% of the time. I grew up in a house where Italian was spoken half the time. The things they didn't want me to hear, everyone spoke Italian. So again, I mean, I grew up like Farzetta, I swear to God, they had the face of Sicily on it. The whole thing, man. I mean,
I was going to say they probably spoke Sicilian dialect and a very specific Sicilian dialect.
The whole thing was in Italian. They'd be in the car. We'd go for a drive down to the Cove, and everybody be talking Italian to me, and they go, you know, hey, you know, aspetta this guy over here, you know.
Oh my God, yeah.
And you're going like, what the hell are they? Then I started picking it up. That's when they stopped doing it. I don't know.
Hashpet is a very big dialect word for all the Medigons. The Hashpet is a very because the Queen's Italian is supposed to be like aspette, like that aspette, but the dialect of the southern regions like Calabria, which is southern, thank you, and Sicily, which is the most southern, is more of a Hashpet, like a Hashpet type of thing. It gets a little stank on it.
Holy cow, that is my brother from another mother, Farzetta. How you doing? I appreciate you doing this for me, brother. Thank you. Again,
my pleasure.
We are in a tell me the truth. This is a fun time, though. Because, I mean, you have a lot of drama going on here. Hey, one last one. Does Goedert start the year in September with the Eagles? Is he there or is he gone? I think he's gone.
Yeah, he's gone. I thought it was 55% that he was back at the end of the year. But once you see reports about, go seek a trade, that ends two ways. One, you get traded, or two, you hold out. And Dallas Goedert, to me, isn't the type of guy that holds out. Like, I don't think you're going to see him in a bathrobe and fuzzy slippers in Japan like you did to Hassan Reddick. But I think he also knows that this could be one of his last deals as well. He also knows that he's been banged up in his career. He doesn't want to risk it. He doesn't want to go out with some, God forbid, injury and then have to rework his entire NFL career. So I think it's a matter of the Eagles saying, look, we want you back on the deal that you're at. We're not spending more money than we have to. And then I think the deals that they've made so far this offseason kind of attest to that already. So go seek that trade. Go see what you could get back. And then some other team, I hope for his sake, because I really like Dallas Goedert. And I think the guy with the injuries, unfortunately, he's been a workhorse for this Eagles team. I think he is a Pro Bowl caliber player that unfortunately hasn't been out there long enough or healthy enough to prove that he is absolutely worthy of that. But I think talent-wise, he absolutely has that. So I hope the best thing happens for him, but ultimately you're pulling for the Eagles in all of this. But if you're making a prediction, I think he's played his last down as a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he's elsewhere on a new deal. Absolutely,
man. And to Hassan Reddick, man, he thought he was Pai Mei last year, if anyone knows Kill Bill. He thought he was Pai Mei last year with them slippers on, and he ended up getting sent with the five-finger death pop. Boom, with the Eagles. And
I was just gonna say, was it five fingers? He did that to his bank account last year, and then this year he brought it back to life.
He threw $15 million in the trash can and lit it on fire, and then put his slippers on. How you doing? Hey, Barty, thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Take it easy, guys. Take it easy.
You got it. That is our friend Marc Farzetta. We appreciate him. Don't forget to check his show out each and every single day. Starts off the broadcasting here on JAKIB Sports, too. Bottom of the hour, we're going to talk to our boy, Marc Schlereth from Fox Sports. We will talk with him, get his thoughts, but don't forget my great friends at Morgan & Morgan. The #1 injury law firm in the United States is my friend John Morgan's firm. You bet, man. If you're ever injured, you have to check out my friends with over $20 billion recovered for clients across the country. I told you about the family in PA, right here in PA. $650K they were offered by an initial insurance company offer. They said absolutely no way. They ended up getting almost $30 million in recovery for that family in PA. In Florida, $350K. Here, take it. No way. Morgan goes in there. John and his people, thousands go in there. They end up getting $12 million for that particular client and their family there. If you're ever injured, please check out my friends at Morgan & Morgan for more info. forthepeople.com/Big Sills or Pound Law 529. That's forthepeople.com/Big Sills or Pound Law 529. And do me a favor, you tell them Big Sills sent you.
This is Eric. When he got